Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Unfortunately, Marco is not here, but I'm here to fill in the shoes best I can for the 250th episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And let me introduce my friend, my colleague, Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining us. Pastor Marco Quintana is out of hospital, but he is hopefully recuperating. He had a consultant, a specialist appointment today. We're waiting for the results of that, but at least he is out of hospital. His apologetic regrets that he could not be with us today. A couple of other announcements. The Montreal England Conference in Staffordshire, England is fully booked. We can't take anyone else, and we've got all the rooms we can get. There's just no way we can get anyone else in within the fire regulations permitted for the facility. And it's a pretty big facility. It's a rather big facility, but we booked it out wall to wall. We just cannot get anyone else in. We regret having to turn people away. Scotland is booking up quickly as well, but there are some places left for the Montreal Conference in Gartmore House in Scotland with Pastor Chris Broth and myself. We do also request prayer for Pastor Tony Pierce. Tony Pierce was going to be one of the speakers at the English conference, but Tony has had some health battles recently, and he's pretty much confined to staying in London. He will not be able to travel for medical reasons. He'll not be able to come to the conference. We are going to get Lord willing, a suitable replacement, but he regrets that he's had to cancel. It's just purely a health-related issue, but we do ask prayer for Tony's health. He's a good man, and, biblically upright, Christ-centered leaders are a very short commodity in Great Britain, and he's one of the ones who is that. Now, God is graciously raising up some other younger ones like Pastor Tim Leach, but we do ask prayer for Tony Pierce. That's essentially what's happening here with Montreal and Britain at the time being. There are some places left in Scotland. You can still book for Scotland if you live in the north of England or in Scotland, or perhaps Northern Ireland. There are people who come from elsewhere, not just from Scotland. But England is completely booked, and there's nothing we can presently do about it. Beryl has tried just about everything she can, and that's it. We are filled up, and filled up is filled up. Okay.
Thank you, Jacob. And of course, wouldn't be a show without Davey from Down Under. Davey, how are you doing this morning, right?
Yes, yeah, Saturday morning, yeah. I can't believe another week's gone by, but it's been quite a week, actually. It really has been quite a week. I do want to thank everybody who has been praying for Pastor Marco, too. I really want to thank everyone for their prayers on his behalf, too.
Yes.
Absolutely. Please keep him in prayer. And Davey, why don't you go ahead and tell us if someone wanted to pick up USB, let's go ahead and take care of that now.
Yeah, no worries. Well, yeah, the USBs are still available. You can email me at Davy, Davy, rosengreen@gmail.com. They are available now in the UK through Montreal, UK. Also, we finally got a distributor in both Canada and the US. So we have been sending out orders to US and Canada, but if you order them from the US and Canada, you should be able to receive them a little bit quicker now. So you can order them through Montreal, US, and I forgot to find out who's doing them in Canada, but I'll get that info for you next week.
Thank you so much, David. And finally, graciously staying on from the Israel Report, we have Elon from Israel.
Good evening, Jay.
Good evening. How are you doing?
All. I'm okay. Yes, I'm fine. I'm just purring along.
מה שלומך? הכל בסדר בארץ כרגע?
הכל בסדר, כן. כמעט הכל בסדר, כן.
כמעט הכל בסדר, יופי.
אנחנו בחיים. זה מספיק.
אנחנו בחיים, זה נכון. אדון הוא יבוא בחזרה עוד מעט ויש לנו מה לעשות בינתיים. Baruch Hashem. The Lord is coming soon and we have what to do. in the meanwhile. Well, all right, let's proceed, please. We have
Just
quite
one quick announcement, Jacob. I just want to remind everybody, if you wanted
sorry.
to grab any of our lessons, you can download them from any podcast server. We have them on Apple. We have them on Spotify. These are great if you're traveling. These are great if you wanted to collect the lessons. Other than the USBs, they're free if you wanted to download them. And we try to keep them up to date. This episode will be premiering in the next few weeks. Jacob's lessons on Jeremiah, Exodus, Hebrews, all of them are available only on USB. And then on top of that, if you have not already, please subscribe to Moriel Chapel on YouTube and also Moriel TV on X or Twitter. With that, let's get caught up. Jacob, to begin with, Tim Kaine had some interesting remarks made this week. Why don't you go into that?
I find it absurd that a United States senator, I imagine he probably went to law school on top of it, but absurd that a United States senator could be so demonstrably, absurdly ignorant. There is no euphemism for the moronic. And his statements before the U.S. Senate this week were nothing less than patently absurd, totally ludicrous. This is a man who is not only arrogant, but he's beyond ignorant. His remarks were as follows. In response to a statement made by a ranking official from the present administration that the Constitution and the founding documents of the United States, and of course its founding fathers, predicated American constitutional democracy as a republic on the premise that rights come from God. They do not come from politicians or from governments. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. The Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the U.S. Constitution are both theistic documents. And even the founding fathers of America, framers of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, who are not in any orthodox sense Christians, such as Thomas Jefferson, who was a deist, or Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Paine, still accepted the premise of the Judeo-Christian faith as a moral philosophy and predicated American national identity and the institution of its government on that basis, that rights come from God. They do not come from political entities, from governments, from kings. They come from the Creator. They're endowed by their Creator. That is fundamental. In better times, that would have been taught to children in schools at the age of 10 in the United States. You have a U.S. senator, former vice presidential candidate with Hillary Clinton, her running mate, the senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, who said he's very disturbed that somebody would say that. He's very disturbed about the basic philosophical principle upon which the nation is founded and its government and its model of government and its concept of democracy derives from. That rights come from God. He said it's very disturbing. And then idiotically, completely idiotically, he moves on to make the comparison of people who believe what the Constitution and Declaration of Independence unambiguously state with the government of Iran, with the terrorist radical Islamic Shia government of Iran, saying that's what the Muslims believe. And they hate people, they hate Christians, they hate Jews, they hate. And he's comparing those who believe that rights come from God with the Islamic government. This is pure idiocy. Pure idiocy. This is almost, you'd wonder if he's of sound mind. The Constitution absolutely does state that rights come from God. But the Constitution also directly decrees that Congress shall have no say in the establishment of a religion. Unlike in Europe, where you had Erastianism and state churches, like the Church of England or the Church of Scotland or the Staatenkirche in Deutschland or whatever, or the Roman Catholic Church in Italy, that there would be no state church in the United States. And most of the founding fathers subscribed literally to the statement of Jesus, which drew a distinction between church and state. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. That was their theological position. But it was also their legal and constitutional position philosophically, that the government should not dictate religion or interfere with the religious beliefs of people to believe what they wanted. Now, you did in colonial America have the Calvinistic Puritans in Salem, Massachusetts, influenced by Cromwell and what was happening in England under the Puritans. They were theonomic reconstructionists. They did try to make a state church and make the state an instrument of religion, of the Reformed religion. They tried to do that. There were other Puritans, or separatists as they were known, who went against this, including Roger Williams, the founder of the American state of Rhode Island, and Joseph Hooker, the founder of the American state of Connecticut. There were separatists who did not believe the same philosophy as Cromwell's Puritans that was imported to Massachusetts. However, that existed in colonial America among the Puritans imported from England. That happened, but it never, ever, ever was incorporated into the philosophy or the legal content of American law. It was alien to the Constitution that forbade it. For this moron, this moron, a U.S. senator, a complete and utterly ludicrous moron, to equate a belief that rights come from the creator, not from politicians, with the government, the terrorist government of Iran with Sharia, Islamic law, is not only stupid, it's not only ignorant, it's preposterous. It is unbelievable. Senator Cruz, Ted Cruz, from Texas, made the statement that this demonstrates how far the Democratic Party, that's been hijacked by the socialist left and by globalist elitists, it has been, how far it has moved away from the traditional national American identity and heritage. How far it has moved away from the Constitution that has engendered our freedom and has made the United States the most successful democracy in history, despite its many flaws. They want to move away from the Constitution. They want to move away from the idea that rights come from God and put it back into the hands of left-wing politicians. This is Stalinism. This is the philosophy of Mao, of Stalin. The philosophy of the founding fathers of the United States was not the philosophy of Iranian fundamentalism or Ayatollah Khomeini. The only way that somebody could fathom that Tim Kaine is anything other than a complete imbecile is if he's deliberately lying. Now, I accept the fact that he may well be both an imbecile and a liar. I accept that. I accept that. But his remarks are absolutely outrageous. How can you equate Sharia law of Iran, a pro-terrorist regime, with American constitutional democracy simply because American constitutional democracy says rights don't come from politicians or governments, but from the creator? Therefore, we are like the Iranians if we believe that. He has spit in the face of the national heritage and identity. He has torn up the Constitution in principle, and he has completely rejected the democratic philosophy of George Washington, of John Adams, of Thomas Jefferson, of James Monroe, of James Madison, of Benjamin Franklin, of John Hancock, of Patrick Henry, of all of them. This man is not only a disgrace, but anybody who would vote for such an arrogant, elitist, imbecile should have their head examined. There is a race for the governorship of Virginia coming up. They have a fairly good governor at the moment who is not a Democrat, but a Black American conservative woman, a very intelligent woman, Winsome Sears, is a candidate.
Yes.
I pray to God that she wins that election in Virginia. And I pray to God the people of Virginia depose Tim Kaine. He's not qualified to be a senator because he's too stupid. He's not qualified to be a U.S. senator simply because he's too fundamentally stupid. He's too much of a useless idiot. To make such a statement before the U.S. Senate, it's just something you can't even comprehend. But Ted Cruz is right. It shows what the Democratic Party is. Anybody who thinks the Democratic Party of today is the Democratic Party of JFK or Sam Nunn or Henry Scoop Jackson or even Ed Koch doesn't know what they're talking about. Now, Virginia works this way. You have a combination in Tidewater, Virginia, the area around Norfolk and Newport News, down that way, of military families who tend to vote conservative. And you have a large minority population who are easily manipulated, particularly Black people, are manipulated by the left. I hope Winsome Sears, as a Black candidate, who's a very intelligent and articulate woman, I hope that the people of Tidewater, Virginia, who are in the minority or in the social minorities, will listen to her. The other problem is the other population center of Virginia are the Washington suburbs, Fairfield County, places like that, Arlington, Virginia, Roslyn, Virginia, that area. And just like Georgetown and the Maryland suburbs, it is saturated with liberals. Left-wing liberals. It's saturated with that. The only exception, again, being the military families around the Pentagon and things of that nature. That is what is happening. The state capital is in Richmond, but Richmond is not the center of power in that state demographically or electorally. It's the Tidewater area, and it is the Washington suburbs. So please pray for the elections in Virginia. Ms. Sears, Winsome Sears, she may even be a saved Christian. She certainly has Christian moral values. Additionally, pray that God removes Kaine. Not just is he an enemy of the Constitution, not just is he completely and utterly ignorant, but he is somebody who seems to be anti-God. Anti-God. He's an evil man, a very, very evil man. And we need to pray that God removes him. I would say the same about Mr. Starmer in England, but right now we're talking about Virginia. Please, Lord God, remove that wicked man who is trying to divorce the heritage and identity of the United States from its Judeo-Christian foundations. In the name of Jesus, remove him, Lord.
Jacob, just a real quick question. When we have candidates like Tim Kaine, what does that speak to the spiritual nature of the United States at this point? That you have so many people that probably would agree with him, that you need to take God completely out of the idea that our rights derive from our Creator.
Yeah, they took separation of church and state to mean something the Constitution never intended. Thomas Jefferson, who was a deist, he was not a Christian, he was a deist. He, at the taxpayer's expense, used federal money to print New Testaments and to give them to Native American Indians. They all subscribe to the Judeo-Christian principles of morality and deity, at least, in some sense. Thomas Paine would have been the most atheistic, but he, on his deathbed, had a turnaround. I don't know if he had a deathbed conversion, but he obviously abandoned the rank atheism of his earlier years. And Benjamin Franklin never was anti-Bible or never anti-Judeo-Christian. Tim Kaine is. Again, if you went back a generation ago, overwhelmingly, most Democratic voters in the United States would have been pro-Israel. Now, overwhelmingly, most are against Israel. Yeah. It would have been unthinkable to say that we should abandon the national heritage and the philosophy of democracy America was built on, that rights come from God, and that if you don't believe that, you're the same as the Iranian terrorist fundamentalist Sharia proponents. This would never have been in the thinking of any sane Democrat. But it's a party that has lost its sanity. There doesn't seem to be any more sane Democrats.
Yeah.
Very few and far between. Let's move on to our next topic. The musical chairs number going on in Britain right now, as cabinet is being completely redone from the top down. And this is all because Angela Rayner, she didn't pay her taxes on her second home. In fact, she, I believe it's £40,000 underpaid in taxes for her second home in Britain. And that has caused her to be removed from her position as deputy prime minister. And her replacement, Jacob, it's not looking so good for Great Britain.
No, it is not. Let's understand something. Notice it's to do with real estate taxation and laws concerning tax benefits for properties. It's in a broad sense a British equivalent of Adam Schiff, of Letitia James, and of this other pathetic woman who Mr. Trump has rightly removed from the Federal Reserve. It goes on in Britain too. She got caught the same as Letitia James got caught, the same as Adam Schiff got caught. In the scandal, she was forced to resign today. Mr. Starmer is in political trouble. People are defecting from both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party into the Reform Party. Nigel Farage, Mr. Lowe, and people like that. He's in trouble. When the British government and the parliamentary system is in trouble, they do three things. There's one of three main responses. The first is a reshuffle of the staff at number 10 Downing Street, the equivalent of the White House. A staff reshuffle. The second is they amend the budget and they try to give financial inducements to people to vote for them. The budget's coming out in November. They're pushing for that now, trying to find a budget that'll help save their neck politically. And the third thing they do is a cabinet reshuffle. Starmer is desperate, and he's doing all three. He's doing all three. In his cabinet reshuffle, now that the deputy prime minister has been forced to resign due to what everyone would see nearly as political corruption, or as corruption, as not paying tax duties, as you point out, on purchasing a second property. Now that she's gone, who does he get to be the new deputy prime minister? The Afro-British anti-Israel left-wing David Lammy. Well, who then becomes the new British Home Secretary? The Home Secretary controls the Home Office. Some countries it's called the Interior Ministry. Its closest American equivalent would be the Department of Justice, or a combination of the Department of Justice and Homeland Security. Saeed Mahmoud, a Muslim. He's put a Muslim in charge of law enforcement and crown prosecutions in Great Britain. That's what Starmer has done. Again, a Muslim who is hostile to Israel, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Who panders to and placates Islam increasingly, much like Khan, the mayor of London, and much like the former First Minister of Scotland. You have somebody in charge of the police and crown prosecution in Britain. Someone running the Home Office, which also controls part of internal security. It has some control over MI5, some control. Deep state, the British deep state, is in the hand of a Muslim. And not a centrist Muslim or a moderate Muslim, I would not say. This is what is becoming of England. It's becoming Islamized. It is becoming anti-Judeo-Christian. It is getting worse, literally, by the day. Democracy is under attack. Hundreds of people, hundreds, have been taken into custody simply for posting things on the internet that the government doesn't like. What Biden tried to do with the censorship, using the FBI as a political police force, going to Silicon Valley and pressuring Zuckerberg and these people to inhibit free speech and calling any speech that they hate speech. Britain is that on steroids. As I've been saying, I no longer consider Britain to be a democratic country. This past week, Nigel Farage went to the United States, to Washington, and he told people that the very nation that had the mother of parliaments in Westminster, the British Parliament, the mother of all parliaments globally, and where you had the harbinger, the conception of what would become democracy in the modern sense, the Magna Carta, the country that gave the Magna Carta, putting an end to the exclusive divine right of kings, an absolute autocracy, putting the English-speaking world in the direction of representative government. And the mother of all parliaments is no longer a democracy. There's no longer free speech. Now, again, I would maintain that this is because of the decline of belief in God and in the belief in biblically based morality upon which parliamentary government was predicated. As I've said many times, despite their many faults and many mistakes, the Puritans knew democracy could only work if nation is governed by men who are governed by God, and if man's laws are based and derived from God's laws. Now that that's gone, the democracy and freedom that the scriptures and the Judeo-Christian faith and Judeo-Christian monotheism engendered is disappearing. I believe there is this, I'm convinced, I know there's a spiritual dynamic underneath what's happening politically, sociologically, and legally. But it's never been worse. It has never been worse. The nightmares that Churchill and Thatcher tried to avoid have become a reality. Now, something is happening in Britain and in Ireland, but particularly in Britain. There is a national reaction. All over the UK, you see something you used to only see in the United States. People flying the Union Jack, flying the national flag. They are being put on light posts, on bridges, all over the place. You're seeing Union Jacks. People trying to uphold and assert British identity and pride in their identity and in their heritage. This is being attacked by the left-wing media, by the government, by the Islamic community as racist and imperialist and neo-colonialist. Imagine flying the flag of your own country is a racist act, is an act of political extremism, is symbolic hatred. Meanwhile, they fly Palestinian flags all over the place. In de facto terms, loading Hamas, even though they may not say it that way. In Scotland, the Scottish government has raised a Palestinian flag in Edinburgh over the capital of Scotland. Union Jack, no. Islamic extremism, yes. You don't like it? Be careful. The new Home Secretary is a Muslim. He might come after you. This is what has become of Great Britain. But it is a direct reflection and a direct proportion to a nation that has turned its back on its heritage, its laws, and its God.
Davey, as an outsider looking in, what do you see with what's going on in Britain with the flag?
Well, we're following suit, and I think here Elbo's actually probably trying to play games with Starmer, like oh, you know, we can do that too, and we can do it first. It's been a bad week for the most stupidest things imaginable here, but this week they've just banned the wearing or having the Australian flag in the Australian Senate now. That's how bad it's got. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's just lunacy, just how bad it is. I hate this country.
So national pride is no longer a virtue; it's a vice.
Yep.
I wanted to go to Elon real quick. You have a lot of family still in the UK, correct?
Yes, we do. Yes, yeah.
So can you kind of, this is the question I have for you. As a person who no longer lives in the UK, what does your family think of what's going on with the turmoil in the UK? And are some of them for Labour or are they Tory? And how do they view such? Go ahead.
There's kind of there's three or four different reactions. My father, who is now very old, he's in his late 90s. Now, he was a lifelong socialist, but not this kind of socialist you've got today. He came from a poor working class family, and he saw some of the downside of being at the bottom of the heap when he was much younger. And so that affected he was a member of the Labour Party up until the time that Tony Blair came in, and he saw Blair for what he was. Blair was, the one who brought in all the evil nonsense that you see now come to full fruition with
Yes.
Dharma. As my dad said many years ago, he said that Tony Blair wasn't a socialist; he was a social climber. Of course, Blair he had no interest in the working classes at all. They don't care. I mean, all they want to do is elevate them. They're part of the elite, and they want to elevate themselves and produce everybody else to serfdom. So, but at the same time, my dad had a very strong antipathy, to say the least, towards like Margaret Thatcher. I couldn't stand her because my dad was very, very much in favour of the miners. Now, at the time, of course, you had all that violence with Arthur Scargill, the miners' strike and things. So that was my dad. But even he can see, though he only gets to, because he's so old now, he doesn't get to use X and things like that. So he only sees what's on the mainstream media. So he gets a bit muddled sometimes about what's going on, because they only sing the praises of Keir Starmer and all the lying promises he's made. The BBC just makes him out to be like Mother Teresa almost. So he doesn't, but he understands that there's something terribly wrong. He can see the immigration problem with all these illegals, and he gets him very angry. Now, one of our children and she and her husband to be are making plans really to get out. They can see the writing on the wall. So that's, they know that Britain is going to become a very bad place to be if things go the way that they seem to be going and get much worse. So they're making plans to get out. One of another one of our relatives, they just stick their heads in the sand. They don't want to see. They don't want the boat to be rocked. They don't want to see this. They close their eyes to what they see on the news, rather like the Jews did in Austria and places like
Yes.
that in the mid-30s. The smart ones got out and saw the writing on the wall, and they didn't leave, and they got out before it got too late. And that kind of worries us, because I think we're going to see some awful scenes of mass violence and mass pogroms against Jews in the UK. I can't, the way things are going, and Islam is such a violent, evil religion and so full of Jew hatred. As soon as they feel they've got the upper hand, you'll see this, because they're already saying it, slaughter Jews. So, so that kind of worries us. And then we have relatives that are rather leftward leaning and a bit woke, but even they can see, now that they've stopped wearing any Jewish symbols, and it's like a Star of David on the neck in places when they go out in public. So, there's a variety of reactions to all of this.
I guess my question would be, have they changed any of their voting habits because of what they're seeing, or are they still fully on board with Labor?
Well, no, my dad's my dad, Lord forgive him, he voted Labour because he was sick of Boris Johnson and what the Tories had done. Unfortunately, he listened to the promises and didn't look at behind the scenes at what kind of person Keir Starmer was. My brother certainly would not have voted for Keir Starmer. He probably would have voted either Conservative or Reform. And also one of our daughters would definitely not have voted for Labour. They'd kind of got woken up to certain things. So some of them have changed their voting habits over the last few years, yes, but not all of them. I don't. The mainstream media has done a very good job of covering up a lot of the evil. And if you only watch the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, BBC 2, or whatever, and you don't have access to social media like X or something like that that's more open to free speech, you're going to get deceived. Some people actually still trust the BBC. But you only know that if you've stepped outside the bubble.
Yes.
And
Jacob,
yes.
Long term, obviously, I agree with Elon's assessment that there is a certain amount of danger for Jewish people in the future in the UK. Talk to me a little bit about the true born-again believers. Are they in danger in the future?
First of all, what is taking place in Britain now has already taken place in France. Where Elon lives, you will hear more and more people every day speaking French on the high streets, in the shops, restaurants. You'll hear more and more people speaking French. Britain is going the way France already has because of the growing Islamic intolerance of anything or anybody Jewish. So anti-Semitism is driving French Jews, or has driven a high percentage of the French Jewish population to Israel already. And even the French Jews who remain in France, they'll have an apartment and a bank account in Israel and an Israeli passport. They'll have a place to escape to. That is now beginning to take shape in Britain. There will be an increase in Aliyah to Israel. or immigration to the United States. That is likely to happen. Concerning Christians, the Muslims openly say in Arabic, they don't say it in English, but if you listen to them, in the protests in Gaza were this: first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. That's literally what they say in Arabic. First we're going to murder the Jews, then we're going to murder the Christians. Now again, the spiritual and theological dynamic of this goes back to Genesis chapter 3, enmity between you and the woman. The hypostatic relationship, or the heads and tails relationship, between hatred of the Jews and hatred of true Christians, particularly. Yes, there is a vehement anti-evangelicism in the Muslim community and in the LGBT community, both of which have strong political influences within the Labour Party in Great Britain. So the answer is absolutely yes. Having said that, let's understand something further. Islamic persecution of Christians in Egypt has increased again, despite General Assisi. And if he had not been there, it would have been much worse. Barack Obama wanted to get rid of him because Barack Obama was pro-Muslim Brotherhood. Barack Obama, I consider that man to be a de facto traitor in his policies in the Middle East. He wanted to leave essentially a pro-Muslim Brotherhood government in power in Egypt. Sisi saved that country, not that he's the best option in the world, but it was the only option as an alternative to what would have happened had he not gotten power. But Christianity was static in Egypt, and it was mainly Coptic with a small c. Some Copts are believers, but only a minority are born again. They were about 9%, at most 10% of the population. Now there is a 12 to 13% Christian population of Egypt, and the growth has been not among Coptics, but among evangelicals, Baptist, Pentecostals, independent evangelicals. So the gospel is growing slowly in Egypt, and it is growing slowly but conspicuously in Iran, okay? It is growing more quickly in the Islamic countries of the Far East, particularly Indonesia, to a degree in Malaysia, Bangladesh, and even Pakistan. But in the cyber world, something else has happened. It began with our late brother, Nabil, who's now with the Lord, a Muslim medical doctor, an Arab brother who got saved. He's now with the Lord. His gain, our loss. But the effect of the ministry of Al-Fatih, Saudi Arabian, or Dr. David Wood, or Dr. Jay Smith, my friend, a good man. He took my place at Speaker's Corner, basically, or he came right after me at Speaker's Corner. Hatun Tash, the apologetics ministries of and Boutros, the priest, the Coptic priest Boutros, the apologetics ministries of these guys on the internet is having a major effect. Muslim scholars are getting nervous. They're afraid. Critical questions about the source criticism of the Quran are now being asked. Now, there were always academic Muslim scholars who tried to be objective, who looked at things like source criticism. They were called Orientalists, but they were completely banned from the Muslim world and from Islamic universities. There were no Orientalists on staff at Al-Azhar University in Cairo or anywhere like that. Okay, they were basically in the West. But now, in the age of internet, something is happening. Serious critical questions are being asked that they are having a very, not difficult, but impossible time answering. Unlike Christianity, unlike the Gospels, we have the Thesan fragment in England. We know for sure that the Gospels were first century documents. We even have fragments of John, of the first century fragments. Yeah. Okay. The Gospels were written by people who knew and saw Jesus. They were copied by people who knew and saw the apostles. You've got approximately 10,000 manuscripts and major fragments and codexes of the gospel itself. About 20,000 of the New Testament overall, but you can demonstrably show that the New Testament and the gospel narratives were first century documents, okay? By people who knew, contemporary with Jesus, who knew Jesus, who witnessed to the events, and copied and reproduced by people who knew the apostles, okay? This is not disputed. Even Islam technically agrees with this. At least many Islamic scholars affirm this. Islam, not so. There is no 7th century mention of Muhammad or the Quran. None. Nothing contemporary with him. There's now questions, is the Quran's version of Muhammad the real one? The kinds of questions liberal higher critics used to ask about the Gospels, of course, they've been discredited and disproven, but they ask, there's a difference between the Jesus of history and the Jesus of faith. Well, in Christian scholarship, there were some wonderful apologeticists and even some unsaved Jewish rabbis who said that the writers of the Gospels had far too much familiarity with Second Temple period Judaism for this to be written in the 3rd, 4th century after the time of Jesus. That was like Rabbi Dr. Professor Jacob Neusner, one of the most eminent Jewish scholars in the world, Ivy League professor at Brown University, now emeritus. Dr. David Flusser, Hebrew University, Pinchas Lapid, Bar-Ilan University. All of these are doctorates, Orthodox rabbis, scholars. And they've all looked at the New Testament and said the Gospels had to be written by Jews in the 1st century. Okay? Chaim Maccabee in England admits this. They all admit it, okay? And these are just the Jewish apologists who have no pro-Christian bias are admitting it. Islam has no such thing. They have no such thing. Now the question is being asked, is there a difference between the Muhammad of faith and the Muhammad of history? And the evidence is not in their favor. They don't have anything from the 7th century. Nothing, no mention of him, no mention of the Quran. It was like Buddhism was an invention after the time of Buddha. It appears Islam was an invention after the time of Muhammad. It has been demonstrated that the ruins of the 7 oldest mosques in the world, as far away as Western China, the Kiba, when you point to the Kaaba, it was not pointing towards Mecca. They were pointing towards Petra. All 7 of them point towards Petra, not towards Mecca. The descriptions in the Quran of Mecca, where the Kaaba supposedly was, where it's lush and fauna and fertile and green and there's birds and butterflies and it's beautiful. I've been to Jeddah. Mecca is basically a suburb of Jeddah. It's a desert. There's nothing there. There's no butterflies. There's no grass. There's no flowers. There's no meadows. There's no trees. There's nothing but desert. They've built these huge skyscrapers around the Kaaba. Huge. Now, when you build a skyscraper that high, you have to go deep to get a foundation. They have found nothing archaeologically. When you dig, you will find archaeological ruins. I remember in the 1960s, when they built the Metropolitana, the subway in Rome, they had to keep stopping construction and rerouting the lines because they kept hitting Roman ruins. You can't dig and not find the ruins. But they didn't find any ruins in Mecca. Muslims have a problem. This stuff is now on the internet and they're in crisis. And as they go into this crisis, in terms of the intellectual credibility of their beliefs, they are becoming more militant. They cannot respond academically. They cannot respond with scholarly argumentation. They cannot respond reasonably. So they do what Muslims do. They become militant and violent. That is their response to the evidence.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. And this is driving the militancy to a significant degree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jacob. Let's move on. In the Caribbean, some interesting news is showing up. Nicolas Maduro has sent his jets to buzz U.S. Navy vessels. This is a dangerous thing for, I think, Venezuela, not so much in the United States, but it does speak to potential conflict in the Western Hemisphere here in the United States, in the Americas. Jacob, why don't you take us through this?
The Navy did not have a carrier, an aircraft carrier, deployed, to my knowledge, in the flotilla off the coast of Venezuela for purposes of narcotics interdiction. Interdiction. They don't need one. That is what gave Maduro the adventurism to do the low altitude flyby, buzzing the American naval vessels. The Trump administration has warned them. In the meantime, Mr. Trump has responded by deploying F-35s to Puerto Rico within easy range of the coast of Venezuela from Puerto Rico. I'd like to see the Venezuelan Air Force go up against F-35s. Between the anti-aircraft systems, Viega systems deployed on the American naval vessels, and the F-35s, what would become of the Venezuela Air Force in less than an hour would look like perforated Swiss cheese. There'd be nothing to it. But he is a man trying to show strength, not to stand up to the United States, but he's doing it for domestic consumption, because his own government is in a fragile state due to its economic devastation. And this week, the economic devastation has become worse concerning the oil industry in Venezuela. He is not in good shape domestically because he's not in good shape economically. He's, of course, the successor of Hugo Chavez, who now, in all probability, is having a reunion with Che Guevara and Fidel Castro in the flames of hell, in all probability. But that is Maduro, and that is the situation that's happened. It would only take one incident, and Mr. Trump, I believe, and Mr. Hegseth and Mr. Rubio would respond. The F-35s have been deployed to Puerto Rico. If he does it again, the likelihood is he's going to be very, very sorry. He will not only be quickly have his air forces decimated, he'll be humiliated.
Do you think that Maduro's trying to rally other nations in South America to form a coalition against the United States? Is he trying to show leadership in that in a way?
He'd like to have a left-wing government of Sheinbaum in Mexico, but his natural allies would be Nicaragua and Bolivia at the present time. So the answer is yes. But how far that would get would not be significant enough. Oh, and also the left-wing government of Brazil now. So there's a lot of left-wing regimes now throughout Latin America, yes. But I don't think they're going to come to any military assistance of any significance with Maduro. Additionally, what's happening is Georgetown, Guyana, next door, has oil deposits that are being exploited that Venezuela is trying to claim. And there are other Afro-Caribbean countries like Trinidad and Tobago who are seeing their nation invaded by illegal narcotics coming from Venezuela. So there are other nations in that region of the world, closer to Venezuela than Bolivia is, who are not at all sympathetic to Mr. Maduro. I don't think he's going to get very far. His international efforts to find partners have been reaching out to Iran and China. That's what he's been trying to do. And I don't think that's going to get very far either.
I did see this week that China did provide some new amphibious assault vehicles that look like it's from World War II. Those were very interesting, that they were kind of going on a fishing trip with those. It would be interesting to see those go up against a naval destroyer or a frigate.
Yes, an Arleigh Burke class destroyer is something that the Chinese can't come against. What the Chinese are doing is following a similar philosophy to what Russia followed in the Second World War or during the Cold War. Try to compensate for quality with quantity. You know what I'm saying? China has the biggest navy in the world, but how good is it? Now, here is where I do not think that Mr. Trump has gone far enough, fast enough. I favor a complete ban on all postgraduate visas, student visas, for students from China.
Yeah.
They are not coming as students. They are coming for purposes of industrial and military espionage. There should be no student visas for any kind of a postgraduate student coming from China. That would be a very, very good beginning. A retrenchment of American industries, particularly Apple, have already begun out of China. The question is, where are they going to go? India is not becoming the prospect that we hoped it would. I think India is cutting its own throat at the moment through the stupidity and the arrogance and the belligerence of the Modi regime. If the Congress Party is reelected in India and the BJP is deposed democratically, there may be a hope for India to get back on track to rival China for the economic domination of Asia. India is now the world's most popular country, not China. China has a demographic time bomb. India is the world's biggest English-speaking country. It's the world's biggest nominal democracy, at least nominal democracy. India has more scientists and engineers per capita than any other country in the world. Benares is the Silicon Valley of Southern Asia. It has a common threat and enemy with the West in Islam because of Pakistan, and even now to a degree with Bangladesh, but particularly with Pakistan, as well as its own internal insurgent Muslim population. There are more Muslims in India than there are people in Russia.
Wow.
So they have their own issues and they have their own opportunities to replace China as China has peaked economically, and it has peaked demographically. And there have been border clashes with China. Mr. Modi trying to make friends with China and Russia is not in the national interest of India. It's only in the political interest of Mr. Modi trying to consolidate power domestically for himself. If India was playing a role in the international community as a major economy, they would be standing with the West against Putin and against China and things like this. He's just an opportunist. But I really think he's on the global stage, he's out of his league. The best thing that would happen for India practically is if the Congress Party gets elected, if the Congress Party can depose him. They are more friendly to the West. They're less hostile to Christians. And hopefully they will recognize the value of a friendship with Israel in the area of both defense and intelligence cooperation, as well as further developing India's high-tech base. That would be the best thing that we could hope for. But right now with Mr. Modi, India has become highly, highly problematic. So you're seeing this thing now you're seeing it expressed in things like BRICS. You're seeing it with Modi going to China and Russia, and teaming up with South Africa. These are a team of losers. And India is unfortunately joining with the losers. China is not going to be able to reverse its crisis economically. Either is Putin. It's just not going to work. These countries who are going that way, trying to play a political game like Brazil and India, are being stupid. South Africa, somebody pull the chain. It's over. South Africa's economy has gone down the sewage system. They're not going to be able to revive South Africa. It's just not going to happen. The ANC has destroyed that country. It has replaced one evil with another, and it has undermined the economy to the point where South Africa will have no future as long as there's an ANC government or anything resembling it. Malema would even be worse. He would do to South Africa what Mugabe did to Zimbabwe. So these countries are they're a pack of losers. They think by uniting, putting all these losers together, it's going to make a winner. But it's not going to happen. It is just not going to happen, at least not in the foreseeable future.
To your point, Jacob, like you said, China, Russia, and India teamed up to have a conference recently. And one of the interesting things that has occurred now is Trump is proposing a ban on tech outsourcing to India for any American jobs. What would that do to the Indian economy if suddenly no more outsourcing was allowed from American companies?
You have a problem with your computer, and you need a specialized consultation with a software engineer. You pick up the telephone and you dial the 800 number. An engineer is going to answer in Bangalore, India. An English-speaking engineer in India is going to answer. We're not just talking about, the credit card answering services and things like that. I got a problem with my Visa card or something. We're talking here about high-tech jobs. Additionally, whenever you have a trade imbalance, the country who has the surplus is at an automatic disadvantage with its customer. India exports more to the United States than the United States exports to India. Oh, okay, but something else. As these companies like Apple, and it's not only Apple, withdraw, and Tesla and so on, begin to withdraw from China, India had a golden opportunity that it's blowing. It could have had that kind of capital investment that would propel it forward to be the eventual successor of China as the economic dynamo of Asia, the way that China displaced and replaced Japan. India could have replaced and displaced China, possibly, despite its internal problems, the corruption and the fact that there's Sikh, Muslim, and Hindu fundamentalists who hate each other. Okay, but despite that, it had a lot of potential. Mr. Modi is throwing that potential out the window. He's just throwing that out the window. To buy cheap oil from Russia, the price of oil is going down anyway. Noticeably, this week, no matter what he said, even though he met with Japan and he met with Putin, despite that, he lowered Indian tariffs on American imports this week. So he said one thing and did another. It's all a political game. It's all a political game. I personally think it would be better if the Congress Party got in power, providing they do not go back to their socialist leanings and become overly friendly with countries like China again, as they once tried to be. But that didn't work. China and India have had 5 or 6 border wars since the end of the Second World War. There's also a large Indian diaspora in Great Britain and the United States and Canada and Australia. A lot of them are well-educated people, and they understand these things. They are westernized, educated in the West, many of them, and they understand what's actually happening in India. Despite their love for the country, they do not necessarily translate that into a loyalty to the BJP. The BJP is not doing India any favors. India is blowing its opportunity. It's blowing its opportunity to emerge as the new economic power in Asia, now that we see China in an irreversible decline. They're blowing it. Another factor is the United States particularly will say, look, we don't want another Japan or another China or another rival. Instead of going to one country, we're going to go to several. We'll put these industries in Thailand, in the Philippines, maybe some in Vietnam. We'll put them in multiple countries, instead of making another mega power, another economic mega power in Asia, we'll diversify it to make sure no mega power emerges that can threaten the West in the future. That is also a factor, but now we are playing geopolitical chess. I think Mr. Trump knows how to play chess. Mr. Biden didn't know how to play checkers.
Checkers. Yeah. I doubt he could play anything.
Yeah, I don't think he could play tiddlywinks, could he?
Yeah.
I was thinking rock, paper, scissors, really, but that's another matter. Davey, you're much closer. Obviously, there's a really weird relationship between Australia and China. But did you want to comment on India?
Well, believe it or not, our government's opening up, is going to build a whole heap of homes. Your figure escapes me at the moment, but they're spending all these millions of dollars building homes now for, basically Indians to come over. But I do want to get back to Jacob's comment, especially, on the losers and, the losers joining together. We had our biggest loser. He was invited over to China as a guest to their military parade. So Daniel Andrews went over with Bob Carr from here. And he got the thumbs up from Albanese. So, and the more you realize what the military parade represents and is about, and this is crazy, and the media are just sort of, they're okay with it. But the thing is, as soon as Trump met with Putin, I was kind of like, oh no, Trump bad. You get all that, how the media plays it up. But Elbow goes over there, and he's there with Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and Putin. It's kind of like four of the world's dictators all together. But I tell you, the head just goes tilt. It really does go tilt. I don't like... Look, I really think Andrew should have been done for treason years ago. And we're talking back into 2017 when he started doing the deals with China. Who knows what they're doing now? They're also, one of the crazy things in here they're bringing in now too is a truth tax. Elbow's always big on saying, freedom of information, but now it's going to cost. So if you're a journalist, you're a news reporter or that kind of thing, and you want to get the lowdown on what the government's standing for or what they're doing now, they'll give you the information, but for a price. You're going to have to pay now to get the information, to get their policies. Maybe a $60 fee to find out, what their policy or their stand is on a certain issue. We are going the way of China. I can see the social credit system being enforced here very quickly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Next, let's talk a little bit about this Rasmussen poll. It says that a majority prefers socialism, Jacob?
53% of American voters between the ages of 18 and 40 prefer socialism. Only 27% were anti-socialist, and another 20% were undecided, didn't know. The way the question was phrased, I believe, had to do with the outcome. They said, do you believe socialism to put more power and control in the hands of the people? So if somebody without an analytical mind or who does not understand economics or history would say, oh, I believe that, power to the people, okay? It seems more democratic, more fair. They present it that way. Too oblivious to the fact that socialism has never been power to the people. It's power to the elites. It's power to the Politburo. It's power to the Apartheid, as it was known as the Soviet Union. It's never been power to the people. That was simply the publicity stunt through which they manipulated working classes to think that it was to their advantage. The Soviets used to say Russia was a worker's paradise. It was a worker's hell. They were simply neo-czarists. They were simply the czarists with a new name. were every bit as cruel, even worse. Stalin was even worse than the Tsars. I know Ivan the Terrible was terrible, but Stalin was just as bad. They tell people that it will be more fair and more equitable and more power to the people. But it is not. No place has socialism ever delivered that.
Yeah.
Even the economic models they've tried to present, like Scandinavian Euro socialism. One, you still had independent industries like IKEA and Volvo and things like this, and Nokia and these companies that were not government owned. Secondly, you had a welfare state with ultra high taxation that made everything unbelievably expensive. Everything, other than the nanny state, anything you wanted, in terms of discretionary spending, disposable income, was taxed to a ridiculous degree. No government is going to give you something for nothing. Yeah. If they give you something, you can bet they're taking something in return, your money and your freedom. Additionally, look what has happened to Scandinavia. They opened with these liberal policies. Malmo, Sweden is destroyed by Islamic immigration. Denmark is now fighting the Islamic scourge. What has happened to these countries who follow these policies of these left-wing socialist governments? Some years ago in Denmark, with a 4% Muslim population, 4%, something like 40% of the people on welfare were Muslim. They see it as demitude. You've got the infidels to pay a tax, a penalty to us for not being a Muslim. That's how they see welfare. The majority of rapes were perpetrated by Muslims. The majority of victims, 90% of the victims, were Danish girls. Scandinavia is not the paradise you think it would be. Norway has an advantage, a low population and a large share of the Dead Sea oil, of the Baltic oil. It has large oil reserves and a low population. It's like the Kuwait of Europe. It has large oil reserves under the Baltic Sea. I'm sorry, North Sea, not Baltic, my mistake. Under the North Sea, with a relatively low population, they can fund a large section of their welfare state with oil revenue. But overall, it has not worked. Socialism has never worked anywhere. Yet they package the question. It'll give more. Do you think we should do this to give more equity and more control to the people and to be more fair to the workers? They phrase it that way, not telling people that no place has socialism ever delivered that. No place has it ever delivered that. Yet that's how they phrase the question. You know, you've had these educators in the United States from the garbage teachers unions. And there were tests where they would ask children multiple choice. If you did this and it was a moral decision, would you A, give it back? No, would you A, keep it? B, if you found something, would you A, just keep it? Would you B, keep it a secret and not tell anybody, and then go reclaim it at some future point when the situation has died down and people stop looking for it? Or C, would you give it to your friend to hold for you? There was no D. I'd give it back. They phrased the questions. Your choice is to do one of three wrong things. Doing the right thing was not an option. These people are experts at phrasing things in this way. They know how to aim for children and they know how to aim for youth. It is social engineering. That is what it is. Now, there is a trend among Generation Z. They are in small numbers, at least in a nascent sense. A significant percentage of Generation Z does seem to be becoming more conservative and more theistic, more of a belief in God, even in some cases more Christian, unfortunately in other cases Roman Catholic. Nonetheless, there does seem to be something of a change in Generation Z. They're getting tired of the left. But in the meantime, this is the situation you have. It is manipulated by media, manipulated by the worthless garbage education system and teachers' unions in the United States and in Great Britain alike.
Can I ask you real quick, Elon? You live in Israel. Can you maybe comment a little bit about socialism's effect on the economy of Israel?
Well, it's not. The thing is, it's moved. Well, first of all, Israel has moved more towards the right. I mean, if you were looking like 30, 40 years ago, it would have been far more leftward. But it does. I mean, you have got things here that are, if you like, remnants of or originated in a socialistic. We have socialized medicine here. You know, I mean, you've got a social. I mean, it's you can get, of course, private healthcare, but you pay for a lot of your healthcare through national insurance, Bituach Leumi, as it's called here, national insurance. And there are things, you know, so you do get high taxes here. Also, you see, it's a bit of a mixture here because you do have things that you could say are more kind of socialistic, like the health system and the educational system to some extent. But you've also got a high military budget, so that can account for high taxation as well. So I don't think it's. But the country does have a strong entrepreneurial spirit as well. You get all these startups, you know, Israeli startups, and they get bought out by somebody from the US or something, you know. I don't think it's affected as radically as economically as somewhere like now the UK or some parts of Europe. You know, it's I think the socialistic side of things is reduced a lot.
Yes.
Compared to what it was some years ago. I mean, it really was very leftist. You know, if you're talking 30, 40 years ago, much more leftist. In fact, when the state was founded, of course, a lot of them were people, there were a lot of socialists and even communists.
Yes.
But it's not like that so much now.
Yes.
As the population becomes more religious, also it moves away from that, the loony left kind of stuff.
Yes. Yes.
I specifically wanted to. No, go ahead, Jacob.
Can I follow through on what Elon shared? Yeah. He's absolutely right in what he said. A brief lesson in the economic history, social, political, economic history of Israel. Okay. Jews suffered terribly under the czars in Russia, anti-Semitism, often at the behest of the Eastern Orthodox Church, but certainly under the czars and the Pogroms. Okay. They supported Bolshevism. Because they believed it was going to be something that would stop the anti-Semitism and would give freedom to peasants, both the Jews in the shtetl and to the Russian peasants. They were benevolent in that sense. But particularly once Lenin died, and once Stalin came to power, they realized Sovietism was not the ideal that they believed in. The ideas of Marx even, or of Rosa Luxemburg, or of Trotsky. Stalin murdered the Jews. He murdered Trotsky, he murdered Zinoviev, he expelled Jews from the party. So the Jewish socialists and communists, basically, of Russia became Zionists. They wanted to be a light to the nations, or the Goyim, and begin a socialist state in Israel, okay? They would be the Ma'aretz, the poor people. They'd no longer be the people of the shtetl, and they would no longer be the diasporic Jewish merchant or professional person. They would be the farmers and things like this. So they went back. They drained the swamps. They fought the malaria. They irrigated the desert. These people were kibbutzniks. They had kibbutzes, collective farms, and moshavs, cooperatives. They were based on a socialist ideology, both economically and politically. One of the reasons the Soviets hated Israel so much and supported the Muslim states against them was that Israel had the only model of socialism that ever worked up to a point. It worked up to a point, but then it was generally democratic and egalitarian. But then it became socioeconomically obsolete. The kibbutzes now are not what the kibbutzes were. Now they're basically companies. And they're not the alma-aters. It's Arab labor who does the low jobs and stuff. They're the managers. It became economically obsolete. It became a victim of its own success in a sense. But what happened was this. In Israel, the establishment was like in America, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant establishment, and it called WASPs. In Israel, you had the white Ashkenazi, European Jewish, Sabra Protexia, people politically connected. Okay? So the socialists became the establishment in Israel. They were the Morocco, the Labor Party, were the socialist party. The opposition party were the Likud. But the Likud came from somebody called Jabotinsky. Begin, Shamir, these guys were followers of Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky was seen by the mainstream Zionists and by the British during the Mandate as a Judeo-fascist, not Nazi fascist, but fascist. That's how they were seen. They were the opposition. So, because the power elite in Israel were European Jews, Ashkenazi, the religious were not a big factor then. When the French and British empires collapsed after World War II, the Jewish populations of Algeria and Tunisia and these countries and Iraq immigrated to Israel. So the Sephardic Jews, the Oriental Jews, became the poor Jews. It was like a form of racism. You've got the poor Jews who are the Sephardic ones, and the wealthy Jews, the privileged ones, are the Ashkenazi. They were accused of having a Jewish version of apartheid even. Menachem Begin comes along, and something happens. He unites the Moroccan Jews and the North African Jews, not them, but also their children, okay? In Israel, the political left was the right, was the establishment. And the political right was the left. The anti-establishment party were the right-wing voters of the Likud. So the party of challenging the establishment was the right. The party of the establishment was the left. It was the exact opposite of Labor and Tory in Britain, or Democrat and Republican in America, or whatever. The left was the right, and the right was the left. Now, this began to change with Begin, and it began to change because of the religious demographic. Andy is Elon is completely right in his assessment of the change that's happened. That is how it came about historically. If it makes sense to anybody.
That's accelerating as well.
Yes,
it's accelerating as the Orthodox and the religious become more of a larger proportion of the population.
Yes,
that's also accelerating because they have more children. It's like exponential almost.
They can outbreed the Arabs. Even in the hospital in the United States, maternity hospital with the highest birth rate in the United States is Rambam Hospital in Borough Park, Brooklyn. It has the highest birth rate of any maternity hospital in the United States. Why? Yeah. Because it's Orthodox Jews. That whole neighborhood is almost nothing but Hasidic and ultra-Orthodox Jews. They can outbreed rabbis. They can outbreed Germans. They can outbreed hamsters. They have to have a baby every year in case one is the Messiah. It's a mitzvah to have as many children as possible in case one will be the Messiah. That's what they teach. They teach yeshiva bookers. They teach boys in the yeshivas and religious schools. Masturbation is a sin because you might preempt the conception of the Messiah. They actually teach that to teenage boys in yeshivas and in religious schools in Brooklyn and in Lakewood, New Jersey, and Skokie, Illinois, and in Israel, in Bnei Brak and Mea Shearim. That is what is taught. Everything is focused on this messianic redemption. We want Mashiach now. We want the Messiah to come now. And large families is central to their strategy. But it's also central to their strategy to take Israel from being a state of Jews to a Jewish state, as they would define it. Yeah. To them, the Jewish state is not a democracy. It is to be a rabbinic theocracy. While the early Zionists wanted to have a nation and say, we're no longer the people of the ghetto, of the shtetl, no more Fiddler on the Roof. We're going to have our own land and our own state, okay? That was the philosophy of the early Zionists, of going back to Theodor Herzl and so forth, and Ben Gurion and things like this. That was the philosophy upon which the nation was reestablished. The Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox and Hasidic say, no, we want a shtetl. We want Fiddler on the Roof. We want to go back to the way it was in the ghettos of Lithuania and Poland. And you go to their neighborhoods in Brooklyn or their neighborhoods in Israel, and they look like shtetls. They actually look, things have not changed from the time of the Fiddler on the Roof, quite literally. If you've been to Mea Shearim or Bnei Brak and seen it, you know exactly what I mean. Elon, would you care to comment?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, they do look like that. Yeah. Yeah, but another thing though that plays into this, the whole argument would be one of the arguments the left put forward over here for the two-state solution was, demographically, the Jewish population is always going to lose out to the Arab, and so on and so forth. We can't hold all that territory. Well, that argument has now been completely reversed.
Yes.
Because, the Jewish population is now outbreeding the Muslim population.
Yep. Because of the immigration from Europe, particularly France, due to anti-Semitism. It began with the Soviet Union's collapse and the mass migration of Jews from the former Soviet Union. But then in France and Ethiopia, compounded by the high birth rate among the Orthodox. It's no longer a question where the Jewish majority is under demographic threat by the Arab birth rate. Anti-Semitism in Europe, the collapse of the Soviet Empire, what happened with Mengistu in Ethiopia, and the high birth rate of the ultra-Orthodox have all combined to assure that Israel will remain a Jewish state, not threatened by any population growth in an Arab minority.
Yes.
Everybody, that we have just passed the hour mark by a bit. And if you haven't already, please, we have already 16 questions, Davey, for Jacob.
More than
but
that
if you want,
I'd say
more than that now.
20.
Okay. So we have about 20 questions. So in a bit, we're going to be going to backstage, and we'll be asking Jacob some questions, maybe Andy, maybe Davey. But before that, we have a few more topics we wanted to get through. This is an interesting one. Davey, you brought this to my attention. Digital currency is going full throttle in Australia. The National Australian Bank now says that all debit cards will be forced into digital wallets. So make sure if you're in Australia to move your money out before October 31st. You will not be able to access your money unless you have a digital wallet. My question is to the panel, for people who are just tuning in for the first time, why do Christians specifically see digital wallets, digital currency as such a huge problem moving forward?
Well, personally, the digital wallet idea is, look, they can control what you buy and sell. Basically, they can fine you, they can debank you if
Yep.
they don't agree with your policies. And if you look at our governments now and now, all the time, our governments are becoming more anti-Christian, more anti-God, more at war with God, more opposed to everything that the Bible stands for and we stand for. And as soon as we stand up and have a voice, they'll debank us, just like Trudeau did to the truckers in Canada.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, Christians do see it as a technological facilitation of what will eventually be seen prophetically as Revelation 13, the mark of the beast. Nobody will be able to buy or sell or engage in commerce without having that mechanism. It's not a digital currency, it's the right to buy or sell. In other words, you must have this technology to engage in commerce. You know what I mean? It's not, digital currency is not really what it's necessarily talking about. It's talking about the means to engage in trade or commerce. Unless you have a digital wallet, you will not have a means to spend money, or to be paid, or to do anything. And as you additionally point out, has been pointed out, corrupt governments can just close down your bank account with the push of a button if they disagree with you because of your political views, your religious views, social credit scoring, whatever. They can just push a button and you're closed down. And Christians are right to see the potential implications of this prophetically concerning Revelation 13. I don't think it's conspiracy theories or unreasonable to see the way this technology is developing and what it can and almost certainly will eventually come to.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question. Given the connection between what seems to be the world leader in digital currency, that would be China, and the social credit score, why is Australia moving so fast to digital currency ahead of the rest of the world, in fact?
Well, okay, I might need your tinfoil hat. But look, I actually do believe that we are a testing ground here. I do believe we're the testing ground here in Australia for it. Just the pace at which they're pushing this is, just a little bit breathtaking, a little bit overwhelming. I still know people who do not own a computer, do not own a mobile phone. It's really going to make life difficult for a lot of people. I do encourage people to watch the current event video Marco did about a week ago. I think it was called The War on Cash. I do highly recommend you watch that, but I can see the same thing happening here, where we're going to have an increase in homelessness, and the homelessness is going to be driven by people who are either their social credit score is not good, that kind of thing. It's going to force a lot of people into bankruptcy and homelessness, and they're just not going to be able to fit into the society.
They'll do what Britain did. They'll have veterans living on the street, homeless, and they'll put Muslim immigrants who entered the country illegally, into five-star hotels at the taxpayers' expense. That's what they'll do. And I have no doubt that Albo or David Andrews or these people would do that. Penny Wong do that in a moment.
Yeah, they've already been doing it. It's kind of like I remember Bendigo Barbie, Jacinda Allen. This is going back a while now. She did a, what do you call it? A PR video. It's supposed to show how loving and kind she was. It backfired tremendously, but she was basically giving a brand new apartment, taxpayer funded, to an immigrant who just come into the country, within the last couple of days. And the outrage because of people here not being able to get housing and all the rest of it, and yet they're giving the new immigrants taxpayer funded
Yes.
housing.
But the very fact that it's happening, not just, see, there are three countries where the global establishment, call them the global if you want, have test marketed things. One is Israel, because it's culturally, popular culture, similar to the United States, but it's small and it's high tech. Then there's Australia and there's New Zealand. They are microcosms of the English speaking world. You know what I'm saying? Whether you like it or not, it's easier to do things experimentally and prototypically in Australia, New Zealand, or Israel in some cases than it is to do it in North America or Great Britain. It's just easier. And that's what they're doing. They're using Australia as a test market. So is New Zealand sometimes. And during COVID, we saw it was Israel. That's what they do. Corporations test market new products in those countries to know whether it's worth investing in bigger economies. Geographical distance makes it more remote and less of a concern to people in the United States or in Britain. So Davey is absolutely right. It's a test market. It's a test market type environment. It always has been, but it's become a lot more like that. But it's very, very concerning. It's very, very concerning. You've got a situation where in the United States right now, you've got millions of people trying to pay off their student debt. The student debt, in a good case, it's usually tens of thousands of dollars. With people who are in medicine or dentistry or law, it can be $250,000 trying to pay that debt off with interest. And they're giving scholarships for free university educations to illegal immigrants. There are states giving free, tuition-free scholarships to illegal immigrants, while American students are trying to battle student debt. They can't get a down payment for a house. They can't do the things the educated middle class used to be able to do almost automatically because they're crippled by student debt. While in the meantime, the Democratic Party in particularly and the Rhino Republicans are giving scholarships to people with no legal right to be in the country. This is an outrage. It's happening in America and it's happening elsewhere. And Australia is not an exception. You're going to see the same kind of trend.
Let me ask another question real quick. Davey, is there maybe any ties to some of the bills passed specifically about online or speech online that might tie into the digital currency?
Well, that's the other interesting thing, that online safety bill comes into effect on December 10th, and she still hasn't released any details about what people are going to need to do, what ID they're going to need to have to be able to access things like YouTube and Twitter and the likes. So I guess we'll find that out right at the last moment. Yeah, gosh.
Well, Davey, I mean, you're going to have the rollout of the digital wallet on October 31st. That gives you a whole month before the December 10th. Could it be that you need to have a digital wallet that ties directly to you to also a tax ID?
It wouldn't surprise me. It looks like they're trying to force people into a digital ID one way or another here. If they don't get you one way, they tend to want to get you another way. But look, I do have some ideas on how we can still combat this. Ways we can still share the word and that kind of thing. They won't stop us from being active, put it that way. But maybe we will have to change the way we do certain things. It is certainly a time to seek the Lord. I do encourage anyone who's in that situation, yes, seek the Lord. Don't wait until things to happen, to seek the Lord. As Andy was talking earlier, like with things getting bad in the UK and all the rest of it, and it's getting bad here too for for Jews and even for Christians. Look, if you need to flee the country, don't wait until the last minute. Look what happened in in Germany and Austria. Once they shut the borders, that's it. It's too late. So you need to pray now, seek the Lord now, make plans and preparations now, and just be prepared, be dressed and ready to act. We are told to be dressed and ready, and that goes spiritually, but also, for any practical things, we need to seek the Lord on them now and be led by the Lord. He'll guide and direct us. He will make a way for us. It's just not going to be. And this is something that's been strong on my heart for a while. It's just kind of like people do need to realize and wake up that there is no going back to normal. And I think that's what everybody wants. Everybody just wants to go back to normal so they can get on and live their lives the way they once did. But that's not going to happen, and we do need to realize and wake up to that. That's not when there's no going back to that. But trust the Lord for the way forward.
Elon, let me ask you real quick. Given the fact that you will have in Australia and it's coming soon to everywhere, when you have a digital wallet and like we've said before, you can turn it on and off. How can someone flee under those circumstances when the ability to flee, usually is directly tied to how much currency you have? What happens when the currency no longer enables you to flee to another place?
That's a good question, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
over here in Israel, you see a lot of people using things like Google Wallet and Google Pay and all this kind of nonsense. I try to pay myself for things as cash as much as possible, just because I want to irritate the people in charge as well. I don't like the fact that it steals your what's the word, your autonomy. But in answer to your question, Jay, I really don't know. If the government has complete charge over how you spend your money, not merely whether you have any money, but how you spend it, I just don't know. Once that kind of thing really comes into force, it may be that even before that such things as the mark of the beast come along, believers will be making the decision to whether they're going to eat or not, or be faithful to the Lord. The way things are going, societies are becoming ever more anti-Christian, anti-God, and that's going to carry penalties for people that are faithful to Jesus, isn't it? Even before the Antichrist comes along.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not a thought I relish for people that, because it's hard to, it's hard to know exactly how this is going to work out. It's not entirely impossible either. We could end up with World War III and the whole network gets trashed.
Yes.
Societies are becoming unstable. And the internet and a lot of the data systems are maintained by Western know-how and Western technology.
Yes.
If you get an Islamic takeover somewhere, everything turns to trash pretty fast.
Yes.
You have to look at Birmingham. The place is awash with bin bags, rotting garbage, rotting food in the streets, and rats everywhere.
Yes.
So I don't know. Not everything is completely clear to us.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's one reason we do need to seek the Lord. Seek the Lord.
Yes.
And He will help guide and direct our steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the interesting questions that comes in with all of this is when you look at some things in the book of Revelation, for example, there does seem to, well, certainly after the end of the millennium, there is obviously a reversion to more primitive weapons when they attack the New Jerusalem. But even before then, there seems to be some indication. It's a question of, do you take some of the descriptions of men riding horses as a metaphor or a symbol of people being fully armed, or do you take it literally as that, to some extent technology has regressed? Because it's an interesting question. And
Very interesting question.
I mean, I just wonder sometimes if we're going to see a collapse of a lot of technology, even major parts of it before the Lord returns. I don't know for sure. It's just something that I play with in my mind. I think, I wonder.
Chuck Missler always talked about that. He said it could happen because of electronic pulse weapons.
Oh yeah, EMPs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But
I mean, I think this ties into the 15-minute cities. Elon, the fact that they're really pushing this 15-minute city solution to population, that means by necessity you must not allow people to travel, unless they're approved. They must stay in their 15-minute city prison that they've been crafted.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, with our road conditions, our roads are like Swiss cheese here. I mean, it's terrible going anywhere on the roads here in Victoria nowadays. I mean, they literally do have more holes than Swiss cheese. It's kind of driving on them is crazy. So, they make traveling difficult. They don't incentivize it. They want you to stay put.
Try
like
Jamaica.
Driving in rural Africa. Yeah.
All right, this is our last topic, I believe, before we go to backstage. I want to make sure that we hit this one. Interesting things happening in Germany. A new poll shows that the AfD is now Germany's most popular political party, marking a turning point for the quote-unquote right-wing group's rise. Now, here are some of the things that they champion. Ending migration into Germany, especially asylum-based entries. They want to return to nuclear power and expanding the use of oil and gas. Finally, they want to lift sanctions against Russia and halt weapons shipments to Ukraine. Now, all of those things are one thing, they're growing in popularity, but there's a major election coming up. And what's very interesting is that 7 of the candidates for the AfD are now deceased. Wolfgang Seitz, age 59, announced on August 21st to be deceased. Ralph Lang, an unfortunate death at 67 on August 27. We have Stefan Brandis, died unexpectedly on August 28th. We have Wolfgang Klinger, 71, died unexpectedly on August 19th. We also have K. Gottschalk, deputy chairman of the AfD's North Rhine-Westphalia branch, confirmed the deaths of direct candidate Hans Joachim Kind, age 80, and the two also Renee Herford and Patrick Tsitsi. Now, this is interesting. This is 7 candidates that were on the ticket to basically become representatives in their parliament. They all die. Is this coincidence? Is this just people, people die? Or is this something maybe a little bit diabolical?
I like Elon's take on this. So I'll hand it over to Elon.
Oh yeah. Oh, you mean that maybe these people knew the Clintons? Yeah.
That's the one.
The Clintons, yeah.
Either that or they went swimming in Obama's pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of? It reminds me of, well, to put it down, some would say it's conspiracy theory. Some people would say it isn't. But how many people who knew Lee Harvey Oswald or who knew Jack Ruby or things like this at the time of JFK's assassination died mysteriously or suddenly? But it was not just a few; it was many people. And they didn't die. They didn't die of old age. They just died or just something. there's a lot of them. And people who knew Jack Ruby, people who knew Lee Harvey Oswald particularly, or even who knew people who knew them. Why did so many of those people die? That will always raise those kinds of questions.
Especially when you have a huge potential political victory in this election for AFD. It's almost as if everyone is scrambling to prevent this. There's obviously with migration, there's money to be made. Obviously with the green energy, there's money to be made. And finally, one that's probably most interesting is there's tons of money to be made by weapon shipments to Ukraine. So there seems to be almost like a let's call it a puppet master that's trying to change the election at the base. Because how can you replace these candidates? I believe it's 7 days until the election. So how do you replace them?
I would dare say Germany's position, if the AFD's position towards Russia and Ukraine will be irrelevant. As long as America and Britain and other European countries want to support the Ukraine, it's for sure that Poland, which is pivotal, will stay with the United States. Well, certainly, you can bring armaments into the port of Gdansk from the USA or Britain or anywhere else, or from Le Havre, France, or wherever, or Rotterdam. And Germany is a factor, but it won't be all that big of a factor concerning Russia and concerning the Ukraine. But as you point out, Jay, with energy, don't forget, they went with the green agenda of renewables, and they effectively nearly doubled energy costs. People don't realize that fuel and energy costs in Germany are nearly 4 times higher than in much of the United States. California and Hawaii are, of course, even cheaper than Germany, and they're the worst in the United States. But there are places in the United States that are 4 times cheaper than Germany. It's because they went with this renewable agenda, the green agenda that the left is trying to push in Britain and America and elsewhere. And they have a vested interest in propagating it. It's just a ripoff of the German taxpayer. I don't agree with their position towards Russia. I think Putin must be removed. And then you can renew trade with Russia. But apart from that, they're right in the things they're saying.
I would agree. And it's sad that democracy, it seems, is going to be, at least it's trying to be deterred. I think that's another thing we need to look at is a lot of people like to scream about democracy and how it's very important, but it can be so easily manipulated by power brokers.
That worthless, incompetent bimbo, DEI identity politics directress of the Secret Service, who Biden had, that stupid woman, that bimbo, was the low-grade Secret Service protection given to Donald Trump the reason he got shot, and was that by design? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's a legitimate question. It is a legitimate question. I believe these people will kill to keep power.
I was just about to kind of go there. It seems to me that in Germany, people are killing to stay in power because they have a lot to lose. If they are funding the green energy movement, like we know that a lot of the left loves to do, that's a ton of money in subsidies to suddenly no longer be going into their pockets.
With the ruble worth less than a penny, I can't see Russia anywhere in the near to medium term reviving. I can certainly not see China being what it was, but neither can I see Germany being what it was. I just don't think it's going to happen, at least not in the short to medium term. I cannot see Germany becoming the economic engine of continental Europe again. I just can't see it happening.
The question is, where does that engine go? Nature abhors a vacuum, so who will become the economic engine of Europe?
Yes, correct. That is a question. But, Spain, Greece, Italy, France, they're all in decline.
Yep.
Yeah.
England, certainly. Britain, certainly. They're all in decline.
Actually, it kind of reminds me, back at Christ's first coming, with all the political intrigue, and you had if you read the history of the Herods and this one killing this one and bumping this one off and bumping that one on to stay in power and get in power, I think we're getting to those days again, or we're already at those days again.
Yes. Well, look, what's clear is in concerning continental Europe, it's Daniel 2. The iron is not sticking to the clay.
Yep.
And what this will eventually do is cause people, having rejected Christ, to go to the Antichrist. Post-Judeo-Christian Europe will go to an Antichrist. I do see what's happening as very, very potentially opening the door to the emergence of an Antichrist figure and people turning to him. Because there's no political economic savior now. There's no political economic, there's not going to be another Marshall Plan. The United States has got its own debt bubble that it has to come to terms with. China is a worse. Forget about China. Forget about them. They've turned the corner and they're not coming back. And now Germany. There's nobody, no nation on the horizon. They will look for a savior, and they'll get one who will be a false savior. This could be Daniel 2 taking shape.
I would agree. It looks like democracy and republics are in themselves being discredited as unworkable for that very purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't forget, the European Union was dominated by socialists. It's just another example of the economic and political destruction that socialism brings. The EU is dominated by socialist bureaucrats. That's Brussels. You can thank socialism for the failure of the European Union.
Absolutely. Well, that is going to conclude our show. Please stay tuned for Backstage. We'll be going there in just a few minutes. Hello, and welcome to Backstage, the part where you get to ask questions to the panel, but most likely it's specifically to Jacob. So without further ado, we'll get started. Jacob.
Yes.
Regarding the fifth commandment, honoring father and mother, what are the specific boundaries for the definition of father and mother in the Sitzenleben of the Mosaic Law and for today? The question revolves around.
First of all, let's understand the term honor in Hebrew is kavod, which comes from the word kaved, to be heavy. Brief lesson in Hebrew. Elon's paying attention, so I have to be very careful what I say. The opposite in Israel, to curse somebody is kalal, to take lightly. To take lightly, it's to curse. To honor is to take heavy. It's something weighty for you. You give weight to it. If you honor something, you give weight to it. You lend credence to it by giving weight to it. If you curse something, unlike in English, the biblical Hebrew now, is you take it lightly. You dismiss it as insignificant or light. So the concept of kavod comes from kaved. It's something heavy for you. God can even speak to unsaved parents because of their position. Much like Caiaphas was a corrupt high priest, but he did speak correctly by the Holy Spirit because of the position he was in. Well, God can even speak through unsaved parents. We have to understand what honor means. Honor means they are heavy for you. Secondly, the New Testament explains this further, a commandment with a promise. As we've pointed out multiple times, the same as your parents were financially responsible for you and your welfare in your pediatric years, should the need emerge, you are responsible for them in their geriatric years. And if you turn your back on needy parents, you're not honoring them. and it can reduce your own longevity. It literally, the New Testament says it can reduce your own longevity. That is the second meaning. Now, it is speaking about parental relationship, progeny. There are those in false religions and in cults who have redefined this and expanded the meaning, giving themselves license to do so. For instance, in Roman Catholicism, they taught for centuries and technically still do teach. The Pope is the Holy Father. You have to honor him. What he says, Father knows best. And the church is the Holy Mother, the church. So honoring Father and Mother means the Roman Catholic Church and the papacy. They say that. There are cult groups who say similar such things. Now, let's look at what Jesus said. Jesus rebuked the religious hypocrites of his time. For those who said, anything that can be given to help my parents is korban, a sacrifice given to God. Okay? Jesus accused them of nullifying the commandments of God with the traditions of men. Jesus gave a sense of priority to looking after your parents as a first obligation. Somebody's first obligation after the Lord himself is to your family, to parents, to children, siblings, and so forth. That is the first obligation, okay? Not to some ministry or something like this. That is not the first. That's an obligation, but it is not the first. Okay, so Jesus confirmed this. Having said that, Jesus made it clear, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. I've known cases, well, certainly Orthodox Jews. I've known cases of even Roman Catholics. There are cases of others, certainly in cults, where what will my family think if I become a Christian? What will my family think? This happened with my wife, whose family were Holocaust survivors. Her faith in Jesus as the Jewish Messiah created quite an ordeal in the family, and her parents were not even Orthodox, but they were haunted by what happened to them in the Holocaust. They were nearly killed. Her father was nearly murdered, but the Russians entered the town at the last moment and saved his life. The family was, her grandfather, the family wiped out, most of them. It became an issue. He and the devil will exploit that stuff. Who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Jesus in Matthew 12 also said, I think it was John or Matthew 12. Your mother and your brothers are outside. No, this is my mother. These are my brothers, those who do the will of my Father. Although we do affirm the importance of biological relationships within the family, which God created and designed, remember, it is a huge blessing to have family and siblings and children who are saved Christians. But if they don't get saved, you are much closer to other believers whom God is their Father and who do his will than you are to your own family. You're going to be with other Christians in the millennium and for all eternity. You're not going to be with unsaved loved ones. So that has to be balanced. If something causes you to put family before Christ or before the Word of God, that is where you draw the line. Okay? That is where you draw the line. That is the New Testament's interpretation of honor thy father and mother.
Thank you, Jacob. I think that covers it. Question number 2. What do you believe God wants us to learn and understand from the account of Jacob wrestling with the angel and the changing of his name to Israel?
Okay, we have a teaching on this, a very old Moriel teaching. It should be on Moriel Chapel or it's somewhere at one of the Moriel websites called The Legacy of Jacob. I deal with it at length. This is something that is often described as a dark night of the soul, a dark night of the soul. It'll happen to every believer. To every believer, it'll happen at some point, not to the newly saved, but after they've been saved for a while. It will happen. Anybody who really is going to be a follower of Jesus will have a Jabbok experience. Jabbok is Peniel. The book's name was Jabbok, and the area is called Peniel. It is on the east bank of the Jordan, opposite near Bet Shan, only on the Jordanian side of the Jordan, that way. I've been there once. The angel of the Lord was a Christophany, was an Old Testament manifestation of Christ. Jacob was at a crisis point in his life over Esau. And he was somebody who had the blessing and calling of God on his life. But Jacob was, like all of us, a man of natural human strength. He outconned Laban. When Laban did him an injustice, he outconned Laban, who was a relative of his. Jacob was always trying to do the work of God or achieve the purposes of God in his own strength by his own wisdom. This is the natural propensity of all of us. Somebody gets saved. Say they are a musician. Well, now I'm a new creation. I'm going to use my musical talent for the Lord. Praise God for the new motive. Okay. Or I was I'm a linguist. I can speak 5 languages. Now I'm going to use that. I'm going to become a missionary. Praise God for new motives. The problem is, it's the natural man or the natural woman. Before God can use our natural gifts and ability, he must break us of our own human strength. So we will trust him instead of our ability. Jacob walked with a limp. The femur is the strongest bone in a human body. He walked with a limp. After you've been through a dark night of the soul, after you've had a Jabbok Peniel experience and wrestled with the angel of the Lord, you will walk with a limp. God will use you. He will use your human God-given ability. But the source of the strength will no longer be yourself. It'll be him. It doesn't matter how intelligent someone is, how clever they are, how good they are in business, how achieved they are in a profession, how talented they are in the arts or anything like that. All of those things are God-given and need to be used for God's service. However, they are also natural grounds for self-sufficiency and even pride. The church has too often reinforced this. I once went to a meeting in New York where there was an astronaut who walked on the moon, laying hands on people, and he'd only been saved 2 years. The Bible warns about this. You don't put people in leadership positions automatically because of what they were in the world. You can have them give their testimony, but that's it. This is one of the things that seems to have wreaked havoc with the faith of Bob Dylan, for which I partially blame the stinking garbage vineyard movement of John Wimber that he got involved with. A young believer will have the natural man, the natural woman, with a new desire to use those abilities for the Lord. That is good, but it's never good enough. We still act in our own strength with our own wisdom. In a Jabbok experience, the Lord seems to abandon us in a time of crisis. Everything goes wrong. This roughly corresponds to the season of myrrh and its imagery typologically in the book of Ruth. It's related to that, but somewhat different. God touches our area of greatest human strength, the femur. Okay. In my case, my own case, it had to do with the fact that I had a lot of money. When I was young, I made a lot of money. I did it illegally, sometimes with drug dealing, and then I did it legally. But I had what most people would consider a lot of money. I was well on my way to becoming a millionaire at a young age, or could have been. Everybody did what I did, was making money. And, I could have done it. Now, I was become a believer. I would write checks to missions and Christian charities and the persecuted church. But when the Lord called me to leave it and go to Israel, wait a minute, Lord, there's more Jews in Queens than there are in Tel Aviv. What do I need to go? My money had a hold on me. Bluetooth mode has been on. The Lord had to deal with my area of greatest human strength, which was, in my case, money. Not the love of money. I used the money for the Lord, but I liked my vacations in Switzerland. You know what I mean? I liked being able to talk to my Israeli girlfriend for hours by telephone. In the days before there was, Zoom or anything like that, when international calls were expensive, I liked if you'd be able to go to the 21 Club at the top restaurants in Manhattan. Money was no object. The money had a hold on me. Now, did I use the money for good and missions and ministry? Yes, I did. But the Lord had to take it away because it was my place of greatest strength. It's what I relied on instead of him. I would have said I relied on him. I would have said he gave me the money, and I believed it. But that is my place of greatest strength. Whatever a believer's place of greatest strength is, that's what God is going to break. They will seem abandoned. They'll go into a time of crisis where their world will fall to pieces, and they'll be left alone with nothing but the Lord, and they will wrestle with him. And he will win the match. He will win the match, but the believer will still prevail. Look what it says about Jacob. Although he lost the wrestling match, he prevailed. It was then and only then he went on to achieve the purposes that God had always ordained for him. He was reconciled to Esau, which has tremendous prophetic meaning for Jews and Arabs prophetically. He then became the father of the 12 tribes and so forth. And the prophecies of Genesis 49, which was the paramount of his ministry. But he had to go to Jabbok first. After that, whenever Jacob behaved in his old scheming way, Genesis referred to him as Jacob. But when it was a case where he behaved like a spiritual man, like a new creation, as it were, it calls him Israel. You and I have two names. We have the name given by our parents at birth, but we have a new name in the book of life. When we conduct ourselves like new creation, God calls us by our new name in the book of life. When we behave like our own carnal selves, he calls us by our old name. Jacob is a prototype and an archetype for the rest of us. Now, there's more to it than this. I explain it in greater depth on the teaching. It's called The Legacy of Jacob. It's I think it's part 1, part 2 type thing. It's a long time ago, but it should be available on Moriel Chapel or on the Moriel website in the catalog. The Legacy of Jacob. But I've given you the nutshell version. James?
Thank you so much, Jacob. Our next question is, Jacob, is Mount Moriah referred to in Genesis the same place as Golgotha or the Temple Mount? I believe it is called the place of the skull, Golgotha, but a search on Google says it's the Temple Mount.
Moriah, okay, is Yahweh. It is almost certainly what we call in Hebrew the Har Habayit, the Temple Mount, okay? It is not Golgotha. Jesus was not crucified on the Temple Mount. He was crucified at Golgotha, the place of the skull. There are four basic possibilities of where the place of the skull was. Most historians and archaeologists would place it somewhere in or around the present location of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the old city of Jerusalem. That is the one that historically has been argued for the most by serious scholars. The second is Gordon's Calvary, next to the Garden Tomb. The geomorphology overlooks an outer bus station. The geomorphologists who've looked at the cliff face say it would have looked even more like a skull 2,000 years ago than it does now. And it looks like kind of like a skull now. It looks like a skull now. General Gordon, who was a British general who famously defeated the Muslims, and he was someone we associate with the Battle of Khartoum, was a believer. And he came to the conclusion that Gordon's Calvary next to the Garden Tomb is the likely location. Speculatively, there are two others, one of which is the Mount of Olives, Har Zayatim. Some say that because that is where the red heifer had to be sacrificed, looking across the Kidron through the east gate into the Holy of Holies of the temple. And that the triumphal entry procession began there. And the Romans would crucify people for sedition, where they committed the act of sedition. Jesus was falsely accused of speaking against Caesar and making himself a political king. So there are those who've speculated it could have been. There's no evidence, Mount of Olives. A fourth one that is rare, but it is a possibility in the estimation of some people. You cannot be dogmatic about it by any means. Was Gehenna, the rubbish tip, the garbage dump outside of the refuse gate, that is the dung gate. The pool of Siloam, the original one, has been about 85% excavated in the village of Silwan underneath where the original city of David was. Outside of that, just to the south, is a valley where Gehenna was located. Gehenna burned 24/7, and Jesus used it as a metaphor for hell. When Jesus, it's underneath something called the Hill of Evil Counsel, and it was a place where terrible things happened. The Moloch worship, the sacrifice of babies, things like that, where male babies were killed in sacrifice to Moloch. Where Jesus then died for our sin as the male baby, the son of the Father. He, as it were, went to a hell in our place so he wouldn't have to go there. If you want to know what hell is like, look at the crucifixion of Jesus. That's what hell's going to be like. A rubbish tip. David Pawson explained this wonderfully, my friend David Pawson, who's now with the Lord. The crucifixion of Jesus is a picture of hell. He went to it, rejected by the Father, numbered with the sinners, in a place of torment and torture, so we wouldn't have to. It is near Hakeldama, the field of blood, where Judas did what he did and killed himself. That is the fourth possibility. So there are four proposed possibilities. Nobody can be 100% sure of any of the four, but we can be 100% sure that it was not the Temple Mount. Golgotha could not possibly have been the Temple Mount, the Har Habayit. Okay, that's my answer.
Thank you, Jacob. The next question. One thing I get hung up on is when I read Isaiah 53 is fulfilled, and Israel recognizes their Messiah, aren't they then the bride of Christ too? If God has put them away for adultery, will he take them back?
Romans 11 tells us that at the time of Jacob's trouble, when 2/3 of the Jews will be killed, that'll happen in Zechariah. But Romans 11 tells us all Israel will be saved. God not only will take them back, he has prophetically promised that he shall take them back. But that does not mean every Jew is going to be saved. It means those who survive at that time, those who look upon him, they've pierced, and mourn as one mourns for an only son. Those Jews who survive and look upon him as the Messiah, they will all be saved at that time. Not only can God take them back, he promised he would take them back. The Jews are the natural branch. Jews who believe are the natural branches of the church. Yes, they are part of the bride of Christ.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. Next question. I just saw in Trump's big, beautiful bill that he gave AI a 10-year free ride to do what they want. I voted for him, but I will point out things that I think are not good. How can this be a benefit?
Mr. Trump realizes the United States is in a battle for the political and economic dominion of the world against China. China is in a race. The race for AI can be compared to the space race that began with Sputnik and the Russians putting the first human in orbit in the late 1950s, and the space race that went through the 60s, the race to the moon. The race between the United States and the Soviet Union was the space race. Well, AI now is the space race of the 21st century, only it's not with Russia, it's between the United States and China. It is crucial to maintaining economic and political dominion of the world and stopping it from going to a communist dictatorship. That is Mr. Trump's thinking. That is what is governing his actions. We all know when super AI is combined with quantum computing, it is going to be another step towards Revelation 13. We know that. But that is Mr. Trump's reasoning. It is the China threat. AI is for now what the space race was for the 1960s.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. Is there a possibility we will see justice before the return of Jesus, or will we see justice done after?
You will see individual instances of justice before the return of Jesus. That's always been. The death of Herod in Acts chapter 12. You will see instances of justice, but you will not see a universal justice until the return of Christ. Okay? God's judgment falling on individuals, yes. A just world, a just society, you will not see that until Jesus returns and establishes his messianic kingdom.
Thank you. Jacob, what do you think of Howard Pittman and his testimony? He seemed very genuine. Would you like to hear his testimony? Oh,
I may have heard of him, but I'm not sufficiently familiar to comment. Perhaps one of the other members of Catching Up is more familiar than I am and would like to answer the question.
I can give you the bullet points. I can give you the bullet points, Jacob.
Go ahead.
While undergoing surgery, Pastor Howard Pittman experienced clinical death and recounts crossing over into the spiritual realm. He describes being taken by angels visiting the second heaven, the domain of Satan's kingdom, before being brought to the very gates of heaven. At the gates, Pittman pleaded his case before God, highlighting his years of good work and service. And he says that God responded that your faith is dead, your works are in vain, and that his service had been rendered to a false god of self. He recalls witnessing a glimpse of humanity in a 15-minute span. Only 50 souls entered heaven, while 1,900 did not, indicating that only 2 to 3% of people at the time were making it in. His number one thing is we live in a Laodicean age. Lukewarm faith will be rejected. Satan is a personal and powerful adversary. True Christians' life must be lived, not just talked about. We are in the days, much like Noah, focus on lies of wealth and pleasure, and the true baptism of the Holy Spirit is one of purification by fire, not merely tongues.
Look, I agree with the second half of those comments. We're in the age of Laodicea, the need for holiness, etc. I would absolutely, it would echo our own convictions. I would say amen to all of it. As for the death experience itself, I have read accounts of many people saying things, many people professing to be Christians saying things, and they don't always agree with each other. What I would say for sure is when you give up the ghost, what will a faithful Christian see when they give up the ghost? They will see what Stephen saw, Jesus coming at the right hand of the Father. That is what a believer will see. What will it be like in paradise? Bearing in mind there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, but the present paradise. What did the Apostle John see in the book of Revelation? Come up hither, okay? We can only base our doctrinal positions on what happens when you give up the ghost by what the scripture tells us about it, okay? We see this in Zechariah, where Yeshua, not Jesus, but the other Yeshua and Zerubbabel were standing before the throne. We know from the book of Revelation, we know from the martyrdom of Stephen, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his godly ones. We are told that. It's a homecoming. Now, I can stand by the things we see in Scripture. As far as individual accounts, I cannot speak to that because, one, I cannot base doctrine on anything not in the Bible. And two, there are too many accounts that are not always in harmony with each other. So that is about all I can tell you. I've not read it personally, so I'm not the best person to ask. But I certainly agree that the church is in the age of Laodicea and that many Christians are lukewarm and are not prepared for the Lord to come or prepared for the Lord to come for them. May he give us the grace to be among those who are. May we be wise virgins.
Amen. Jacob, do you see Israel going into Gaza within the next 2 months to take care of business controlling Gaza, Judea, Samaria, and northern Israel?
I think the growing anti-Semitism, not just anti-Zionism, but anti-Semitism in the world, has put Israel in a place where, as I said this 2 weeks ago, that what have we got to lose? We couldn't annex the West Bank earlier because the world would condemn us. But now the world's condemning us anyway, so what do we have to lose? It's backfiring on their enemies and on their opponents. I can see the West Bank, yes. As far as taking over Gaza itself, the Israelis left Gaza in 2005. They didn't leave it under the best terms. They did it under pressure from the Bush administration. There was no peace treaty or anything. The hopes for peace failed. It was just the politics of the Bush administration who the Saudi Arabians had in their back pocket. That's my view. However, I do not think that Israel would want to take over a population of 1 million Muslims who hate them. I don't think Gaza will be integrated into Israel. Let us also remember in biblical times, even in the times of David, while Gaza, the land of the Philistines as it was then, was under the strategic control of David, it was never a part of biblical Israel. Never part of biblical Israel. Gaza was never a part of biblical Israel, even though it was under the strategic control of Israel at various points in history, dating back to the reign of King David and preceding the time from 1967 until 2005. But I don't think the Israelis will want Gaza. The West Bank is something different. They can absolutely take over the West Bank. Having said that, there is a move afoot to get as many Gazans to voluntarily leave and go to other Arab Muslim countries. But there would have to be a huge demographic shift. The economic conditions and security conditions so appalling where the people of Gaza would have an incentive to want to go live in another Arab Muslim country. I can see that happening to a degree, except that Jordan doesn't want them, the Emirates doesn't want them, Kuwait doesn't want them, Saudi Arabia doesn't want them. Let's understand something. Most other Arab and Egypt, other Arab Muslim countries don't want them. Hamas is the military branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's all it is. It's a military branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. The tentacles of the Muslim Brotherhood extend from some of the leadership of the CAIR in the United States, disgustingly, that it's tolerated in the United States, to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who killed Anwar Sadat for wanting to make peace with the Israelis, to Hamas. It's all a Muslim Brotherhood. The government of Qatar is Muslim Brotherhood. The Israelis don't want that. They don't want it. If you could get the people who were there, a significant enough number of them to emigrate, to leave voluntarily, okay. But other Arab Muslim countries don't want them. Where are they going to go? Sudan? That's the reality.
Thank you, Jacob. What is the origin of the Star of David that is displayed on the Israeli flag?
Okay. There are those who would tell you that the Star of David, the Magen David, is a occult symbol. Well, let's begin with that particular issue. A pentagram is an occult symbol in witchcraft and in Satanism, okay? But you can have people making the five-pointed stars who don't intend it to be used that way. The names of the American space program, Mercury, then Gemini, then Apollo. In the ancient world, these were Greek gods based on constellations. To the United States, they were simply project names for the space program. In one context, they meant one thing. In another context, they meant another thing entirely. You can go to Ireland or any Celtic country, and you'll see the Celtic cross in the cemeteries. It'll be a cross with a circle around it. That was a pre-Christian pagan symbol of sun worship of the ancient Druids who built Stonehenge and Ireland and so on, against whom St. Patrick contended. The same symbol was both at one time pagan and another time Christian. The symbol of the early Christians was not a cross initially. It was a fish, ichthos, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. However, among the Philistines that worshiped the fish god Dagon, it was a symbol of Dagon, the fish god. The mitre of the bishops was that, came from that. Okay? The same symbol could mean different things in different cultures, including the fish, including the cross, and including the Star of David. But to answer your question specifically, in Jewish culture and in Israel, there is no such thing as a Star of David. It does not exist. It is not a Star of David. It is called in Hebrew a Magen David, a shield of David, a shield of David. Jews don't relate to it as a star, but as a shield. They don't see it as a star. A star has nothing to do with it. The actual symbol of Israel as a nation is not the Star of David. It is a candelabra, a seven-pointed lampstand that you see in the book of Revelation, chapter 1. That's first of all, okay? The candelabra was the symbol of ancient Israel, as the fish was of the early church, early Christians. Okay. So where do you get this shield of David? Rabbinic tradition has interpreted it different ways. Okay? Each point in each space, you got 6 spaces and 6 points, represents a tribe of Israel in configuration around the Holy Ark. When the Jews moved from Egypt through the wilderness into the Promised Land with the divine presence and the Holy Ark in the center of them, the tribes were configured around them. That is the predominant interpretation by Orthodox Jews. But it is not seen as a star. It is seen as a shield representing divine protection of the 12 tribes. It's seen as divine protection of the 12 tribes of Israel. It's nothing to do with the star. I hope that answers the question. If you're going to outlaw something like that, because in other traditions it represented something demonic or something pagan, well, then you're going to have to do the same with the cross and the fish.
Thank you, Jacob. Last question. Have you heard of the recent actions in part of Israel where signposts have been put up directing the coming of the third temple? I believe there was also a rehearsal of the red heifer ceremony.
It was. One of the red heifers were burned in a practice burning ceremony, yes. That is absolutely true. And the Orthodox are doing things like that. They're doing several things, but that is one of them, yes. How widespread it is, I'm not sure, but it does go on, yes. There is a definite growing interest in rebuilding the temple, not just among the ultra-Orthodox, but it's extending now among the Hilonim, the secular Israelis, or the Masoretim, those who are moderately religious by culture and tradition. So, yes, there is an interest in rebuilding the temple that is gaining momentum, the same as there is an interest since October 7th invasion of annexing the West Bank.
Thank you so much, Jacob. And with that, we will catch up with the rest of the questions, hopefully in the next episode. I know there is a lot still on the list, but I wanted to leave you with, if maybe Davey, could you possibly give a word of encouragement to close out the show?
Okay. Main thing is, look, these may be dark days we're in, but we just have to keep looking up, keep looking to Jesus, and don't forget our blessed hope, and our blessed hope is Jesus.
Amen.
We need to keep looking to him. If we lose our hope, then we're going to be discouraged. We're going to flounder. If we lose our hope, we're more prone to stray. So keep your eyes on the hope that we have, the one true hope, the solid hope of Christ.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for this 250th episode. And hopefully we keep praying for Pastor Marco. Hopefully he'll be back next week. Otherwise, we'll see you then. God bless.
Yeah. Amen. Please pray for England, for President Trump, and for Tony Pierce and Marco.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.